Hey, what's good, guys? Usually at this point, I put up a silly or sometimes cringy intro filled with memes or boomer humor. But before this video, I just wanted to say that the format for these build videos is going to be evolving a little bit, starting with this one. Some of the things are going to be lost as I try and tighten up the product. Some parts are going to be cut out, and some are just going to be changed, and really I'm just going to make an effort to present a little more information in a more concise way. As always, I want your feedback. If you find these build videos are missing something in terms of content or tone that you used to enjoy, please speak up in the comments down below. There's also going to be a bit of a shift in the builds themselves in the way I present them to you. I'm going to be focusing less on soloing group content and more on making sure that the basics are there for general day-to-day purposes, and that the builds bring value to open world meta groups and increase win rate. In its recent downtuning of passive sustain traits and runes sent a pretty clear message. It's one I intend to listen to and adapt to. I think the previous build videos set up an incorrect expectation that the hardest open world group content should be soloable. This is not a sentiment I share. I know that spamming 18 seconds of protection on 5 people isn't as sexy as soloing a desert bounty. I know that's going to cost me views. I don't care. Unsubscribe is down below. The exception to this will be HOT hero points, because I believe they simulate the pressure that the harder story bosses do and are much easier to access. So with all that said, hey, enjoy the new video. Let me know what you think about the new format down below, and hey, thanks folks. Oh, by the way, seriously, ANET, nerf Firebrand. Seriously, it's out of control. Thanks. Let's go. What's up, everyone? You got Mind Circus here with you, and welcome to the new episode, the new season, the new edition, the newest in new of Mind Over Meta Open World Builds. Before we get started, if you are new to the channel, new to Guild Wars 2, just haven't done so yet, I'm currently farming likes and subscribes in an effort to build a channel. If you want to hook me up with one of those just below the video, that would be fantastic. So with that out of the way, hey, End of Dragons is here. Let's take a look at Vindicator. When the betas were running, Vindicator was actually a big surprise to me, but really I should probably stop being surprised by rev specs. Renegade was probably the big surprise for Path of Fire for me as well. This spec turned out to be a lot of simple fun, and we'll get into it in a little bit about basically what I'm enjoying about it, how I'm playing it, and what I'm doing with it, etc. It's an excellent boon applicator. It does huge AoE damage. I am a really big fan of the simple fun on this build. Taking a look specifically at what this build is doing right, solid AoE pressure, a fair bit of mitigation. It's rev, so you have 2 heals at any given point, but in terms of this spec, you actually get 3 heals. I cannot express how overpowered that can be. 3 heals at any given point within 2 clicks or 2 button presses, whichever you're doing, is a really big quality of life improvement. So we'll keep in mind that we have these at any given point, that all 3 heals are very effective and very powerful. The one thing that does kind of hold this build back will be the dodge mechanic. The dodge mechanic is going to be one of those things that is going to depend on you as a player. We're going to be taking some steps to mitigate the impact of the dodge mechanic. For those of you guys who just aren't aware, haven't looked at Vindicator yet, Vindicator gets down to 1 dodge, but that dodge becomes a very new, powerful ability. This is like the inverse of, say, Daredevil, which gets the extra dodge. This one gets put down to 1 dodge, but those dodges are basically really impactful, fun abilities. So we'll take a look at what we're going to be doing on that. Maybe a little bit of a curveball in terms of which one we're going to be taking for the solo experience, but we'll talk about that. The other thing that I'm going to be going through on this build is I think we've got 3 specific gear setups that kind of address the individual player and their needs. We'll go through what those gear setups are when we get there. 1 is cheap, 2 are not. We'll take a look at what those are once we get to the gear section. But again, in terms of open world builds, I cannot think of, out of the box, a better spec than Vindicator, particularly for those of you guys who are just getting started with Revenant. It may be a little bit of a head scratcher in that not only are we given the ability to flip our legends as we usually have on Rev, we actually get the ability to go ahead and flip them twice to a second legend. So we actually get 3 legends we can play with. So we're going to keep that in mind. It is a little more complicated to play. That said, when just rolling around in open world and swinging your sword and, you know, pressing 1 to win, this build hits like a truck and does its job. So with all that said, hey, let's take a few moments, get into the building gear section on this one. Now, in terms of building gear, I want to go through 3 different variants with you. I'm going to pull up mine and we will take a look, and what we will see is that currently I am running Diviner's gear with pack runes. This is probably my favorite way to play it, but is not going to be the way that I am going to recommend it coming out of the box. If you are a newer player and you are wanting to play this 100% solo, I'm going to recommend that you play this in Marauders. Nothing else changes but the gear. Set it for 100% Marauders. You will be just fine. That said, this build also does a fair bit of boon generation, and in order to make the most out of the boon generation, we have 2 different options. I want to tell you that you could run this in Diviners like I am, but if you're going to find that glassy, if you've not run a whole bunch of Rev in the past, and you want to be getting the the boon access that, say, Diviner's gear offers, I'm going to recommend you take a step and run this in Commander's gear. Now, Commander's gear, very much like the Diviner's gear, only it doesn't have ferocity. What it is going to give you is some toughness. This may be the difference for you. That said, this is a DPS loss. So you've got 3 options. The highest DPS, the highest survivability is going to be in your Marauder's gear. I will recommend that for the bulk of you. If you want to be providing a lot of boons, if you like that boon playstyle, the Diviner's option is not a huge step down in terms of the DPS. It is, however, a pretty big step down in terms of the survivability. Obviously, we're missing a whole bunch of vitality when we step down from the Marauder's gear. And finally, we will have the option of running this in Commander's gear, which has the toughness without the ferocity. And you know, this is going to be your lowest DPS option. It's not an awful DPS option. It's a rather good DPS option, particularly if you're playing this in small groups and want to be giving out the boons to other people. So those are the 3 options I'm going to give you. In terms of the weapons, we will be running, great sword and sword. You do have the option, obviously, here of putting in a ranged weapon. The only ranged weapon for power rev will be hammer. I don't enjoy the hammer, so I'm living without a ranged option. This does create some problems at some point. I'm not going to front on that, but I prefer the sword over anything. So that is how we run that. In the sword, you will see I'm running strength and force. In the swords, I am running accuracy and force. Probably best to put a strength sigil in there for the might upkeep, but one or the other will be just fine. The force sigils obviously are a no-brainer and need to be in there. In the gear, we're running pack runes. Pack runes are power and boon duration with the precision bump, and the grant nearby allies 5 stacks of might, fury, and swiftness for 8 seconds while in combat. This is a very, very nice little buff, but if you are running 100% solo, I will suggest you take off the pack runes and put in some fireworks runes, which are very similar in what they're giving out, only they are not giving it out to groups and give a longer boon duration. So keep that in mind. You have a few different options when it comes there, but I will suggest putting in something with boon duration regardless of what equipments you are running on that one. So that is our equipment. There are 3 different options. I will leave it to you to figure out which one you want to take. Let's go into the build here at this point. Now the build will have a few options here. I'm running Devastation, I'm running Invocation, I'm running Vindicator. On Devastation, I'm running Unsuspecting Strikes, deal increased strike damage to foes with the health above the health threshold. You wouldn't be wrong in taking Battle Scarred. This is DPS, this is Sustain. We have the same issue here with Swift Termination, deal increased strike damage to foes below the health threshold. Okay, this is another DPS increase. It's a very large DPS increase, but if we are struggling for sustain, obviously Dance of Death, applying vulnerability to foes grants stacks of battle scars. Looking at the invocation trait line, okay, we're going to be running Rising Tide, which is again a DPS increase. We'll be running Rapid Flow. Heal yourself and gain swiftness when you use a skill that has an energy cost. This plus Thrill of Combat, giving us the battle scars, will be our self-sustain. It's not bad. It's not bad at all. It's enough to stand toe-to-toe with what we need to stand toe-to-toe with. It does, however, fall behind maybe some of the other things that you may be used to. The pre-nerf Condi Rev or the pre-nerf Parasitic Contagion Scourge will be good examples. That said, I'm very happy with the sustain that this gives. Other options here would be to gain might when you grant yourself Fury. That said, I don't think that this build struggles for might. And finally, Rolling Mists. Critical hit chance has increased effectiveness when you are under the effects of Fury. This is kind of a no-brainer. I wouldn't take anything above this. Finally, under Vindicator, we're going to go right down the middle. We're going to go right down the middle for the boons. If we're playing this for DPS only, we're going to want to make different choices, but the way I'm running this is running right down the middle in the Diviner's gear. This is going to give us might and regen. This is going to be grant endurance in an area when swapping legends or activating alliance tactics. This here is where we are going to start mitigating the one dodge. I will get into this in the gameplay section about the way this works. I'm a very, very big fan of this trait. I tried both of these. I didn't play so much with this one. The Vigor here didn't really do what I needed it to do, but you know, Reaver's Curse, not bad. Gain endurance for every target affected by your dodge. You just have to be lucky with it. This is just a more solid kind of option. And again, I'll go through the process when we get to the gameplay section. And finally, Imperial Impact. Drop from above, delivering a powerful attack to enemies while granting boons to allies. This is a massive, massive boon generator, and I will go through this in the gameplay section. If you want DPS only, okay, you're going to go with Death Drop. Death Drop is so much fun, but in the long run, I got way more value out of the might generation and the protection from Imperial Impact. We'll talk a lot about protection in the gameplay section. And that, my friends, is building gear. So with that out of the way, let us go and take a look at our fashion. Well, guys, not sure what to tell you on this one. I'm sorry. Not only is it an outfit, it's an outfit I've used in a previous video. Not going to front on this one. I didn't want to spend too much time adjusting the look of this character. If you looked at my previous Power Rev video, you will see the armor that I'm running on it. I am a big fan of her look in here and didn't want to alter it too much. That said, I wanted her to look a little different for the Vindicator, so what I did was I went with the Rox Pathfinder outfit. We'll take a look here, which I think looks really, really nice and is a really high quality outfit. So put that on. In terms of the weapons, we will be using The, what do we got here? The Shining Orient Highlander Greatsword, because it needs another name. This sword is absolutely beautiful. You get this sword in the Lunar New Year Festival. Beautiful, powerful, particle effect on that, and I'm a really big fan. In terms of the swords on this one, I am using Vengeance. Vengeance is one of the precursors, one of the early precursors to Shining Blade. I can't run Shining Blade on a Norn because I am too much of a nerd, so that is the way we will run it. In terms of the dyes on the outfit, let's bring that up really quickly here. Dyes on the outfit are right here, and we will be running Ruin, Tarnished Steel, Dry Silver, and Blue Steel. Just kind of a muted look on that. I tend to go into, the muted colors a little more than the eye-catching or retinal burning alternatives, but I'm kind of happy with it. Again, not my highest point on Fashion Wars here at this point, but I'm happy with it and really like the way she kind of came together in that outfit. So with all that out of the way, hey, let's take some time and let's pop into the raid training area and see the way this all comes together. So let's talk about dodging. One of my favorite quotes about this game comes from Wooden Potatoes, and the quote, and I'm going to paraphrase because I don't recall it exactly word for word off the top of my head, but the quote goes something like, "Good players know when to dodge, great players know when not to dodge." Knowing when to dodge obviously is, one of those games one of those things that the game kind of drills into you. But knowing when not to dodge is a function of understanding when to walk out of the red circle versus when to dodge out of the red circle. There's obviously more to it. There's, when to use your evades, there's when to use this and when to use that. This can all become a little bit frustrating for the average player, the player who hasn't been playing this game for 10 years. So taking ourselves down to one dodge can be absolutely punishing for the average player. That said, it's a really good kind of experience to get your head around it, because if you can get to that point where the class itself limits, the crutch of the second dodge, you can actually get to the point where your gameplay will absolutely improve. And I think that that's a really important thing. Now, that's not to say that I think that one dodge is good enough for most of us. So let's talk about the ways that we are going to mitigate that. And we're mitigating that two ways. First off, we're going to mitigate it with food. Now, I don't usually include food in my videos for a couple of reasons. The reasons why is that I don't want to present to people builds that, are lacking in some respect and need to, cover a hole with food. Because quite frankly, there are a lot of times when we just forget it. And that is just human nature. But for this specific build, I cannot recommend enough the following: bowls of Orion truffle and meat stew. What does Orion truffle and meat stew do? Well, 100% chance to gain might on dodge. That said, however, this is the cheapest way to get 40% endurance regeneration. Now, this is really quick, obviously, endurance regeneration, but it isn't going to mitigate the problem completely. Let's talk about the way that we are going to mitigate the problem completely. Let's look at the trait that we took here under the build section, which says grant endurance in an area when swapping legends or activating alliance tactics. What is alliance tactics? Alliance tactics is swapping the second legend. So when we swap to Dwarf, we get some endurance back. When we swap between the two Vindicator legends, we're going to get endurance back. This means if we can quickly spam those three together really quickly, we're going to be looking at a situation where the dodge mechanic, in addition to the food, is largely, and I don't want to say completely because it isn't completely, but it is absolutely largely mitigated. And let's just definitely take a look at that right now. First thing I'll do is take the food. The food obviously is going to bring that back, and then when we do our dodge, beautiful. And let's look at how quick that's coming back. That's coming back 40% quicker than usual. So optimally, if we are wanting, or optimally, when we want to be bringing back that dodge as quickly as possible, what we are going to do is dodge. Okay, we are going to flip our legends, then we are going to flip our legends again, and this has our endurance coming back for our next dodge right about now. That's not bad. That's livable. That's not a point where it's actually going to start crushing us. That said, you know, all of this out of the way, if you are one of those players that's fine with one dodge, forget all of this, run some DPS food, and probably take a look at some of the other options when it comes to restoring endurance. That's a personal thing. That's, you know, where your skill level is. I personally am a average player, maybe below average in terms of my skill level, and I absolutely love this food. So all of that said, I'll just go through this one more time, and that is that we will dodge, land. Okay, we will swap legends, we will swap the sub legends, and there is our endurance back right away. And it's a beautiful thing. Can't express to you guys exactly how impactful that is. Now, in old build videos, I would go through pretty much all of these things one by one. I think going forward, that's not something that I'm going to be doing. I will, however, touch on what the really big wins are across all of this in terms of DPS, in terms of mitigation, and in terms of break bar. In terms of DPS, the Revenant sword auto attack, the standard sword auto attack is really nice. That said, the great sword also really nice, but the greatsword is slow. Now, in order to mitigate that, we have the ability here with Scavenger Burst to give ourselves, with the Diviner's Gear, 7.5 seconds of quickness. 7.5 seconds of quickness is really nice. We also get some burning and some fury off this. This is a very impactful skill because not only, okay, does it increase this, but if we are putting this off in some trash mobs, if we take a look, it's actually going to gain boons and endurance for each foe struck. So this is going to be more powerful if we shoot this off in the middle of a whole bunch of pressure. So if we just put it off like that, all right, and we put those in, you can see these absolutely start coming up really quickly, these abilities and the damage that we're doing. So the other thing you might have noticed is that the chilled on there brought that break bar down on its own. That's going to be a big win. We'll talk about that a little bit more when we talk about break bar. So we've got our heal here. The heal grants might. Okay, we've got the other heal obviously on Chalice. The Chalice heal is also going to give us resolution when we use it. That obviously is a big win. When we flip back here, we'll take a look at the other heal here. All right, and the other heal here is on is Selfless Spirit, which is an area heal and a competent area heal, but not competent enough that I personally wanted to, say, gear into it with any healing gear. If you wanted to play a pure boon support role, I would definitely look at something like Celestial Gear or maybe even Mage Eyes or something like that, or probably Harriers, something with healing and with boon duration on it would be options, but this obviously is our solo / open world build, so we'll keep that in mind. In here there are exactly 3 things that I'm going to hit. I'm going to use the heal on this. I may use the regen, but not much. I'm going to use Battle Dance as a oh shit button, as an escape button to get out of those red circles. And as I get really comfortable using that, that'll be one of the ways that I mitigate the dodge problem. But more specifically, I'm going to look at Awakening. Now, Awakening, what this is doing is putting 7.5 seconds of protection down and 2 seconds of initial stability. Stability, one of those buffs in the game that I believe is absolutely essential as we go forward. And this spams it out to 5 people. Now, it's not a ton of stab, but this is also a really nice stun break. Let's go ahead and take a look at some of the more salient features here over on the other one. Again, I'm going to live off Scavenger Burst. I'm going to use Nomad's Advance as a gap closer. And it's a really nice gap closer. And I'm going to use Reaver's Rage for stability. Okay, look at that. It's going to be stability. It's going to be break bar damage. And it's a stun break. It's one of these typically overloaded skills in the game. Let's take a look at the break bar on that. Pretty sweet break bar damage. It's pretty nice. I'll be honest with you guys, I didn't touch either of the elites on this spec very often, and the reason I didn't is I didn't find them very impactful, and in the case of the urn, it just became a bit of a pain to use. So, just to put a cap on this, Scavenger Burst, okay, Nomad's Advance, and Reaver's Rage are the big wins here. If we go over back into the other legend, the ones I'm going to use obviously are the heal, and Awakening is really big here, and I'm probably going to spam out Tree Song for the regen just because I can. The other thing to keep in mind, Tree Song is going to be a really nice little bit of Condi play. This is some good Condi cleanse. End of Dragons, the content in Icebrood Saga at points, have really kind of changed my opinion on the open world Condi cleanse. I will suggest that you have some kind of Condi cleanse baked into your builds here for open world going into the expansion maps particularly. I think that that's important. So those are the big wins here. The weapon skills are the weapon skills. The really big wins on the weapon skills are obviously another gap closer, okay, on the 3, and the 5 is just massive DPS damage. You can see that even without kind of winding up and building anything, it does a decent amount of damage. So let's take a look at a little bit of a rotation that I've put together on this one. What I'm going to do here is I'm probably just going to hit Tree Song, okay, Awakening, all right, then flip over, close the gap, do a stun, put this down, and then hit the 5, and that is a nice amount of damage. Now, one of the biggest pieces of feedback I got from this build is, there's kind of a 3-step way to play it. You can walk around just fine in open world and just smash things with your sword. As you can see, this thing hits like a truck. The 2 is really nice. Okay, the 4 is a block. And that 5, you can live off that all day. That's a beautiful thing. You can just walk around, never apply boons, and be just fine in open world doing that kind of damage. The next way to look at it, though, is if we want to spend a couple of seconds getting ready for a fight, I will, hit Awakening and Tree Song. I will close the gap. I will change the sub-legend. All right. That, and then put that down. And if you look at my boon bar right now, that's hard to beat. That's really hard to beat. Again, your average hits are going to be stronger running the Marauder's gear, but you're not going to keep those boons up nearly as long. But when you are coming in to engage an enemy, all right, and we'll just put this over here, and you are hitting, these 2 blue things, for lack of a better word, before anything else, you're going to get a lot of value off that. So that's kind of the basics of how it works. Let's go over and let's talk about this for a second. If you are good with Rev, if you do not need any kind of sustain options, etc., if you are not worried about it, then what I will recommend you do is you dump Dwarf for Shiro. However, the Dwarf is bringing us so much on this build. Number one is that a lot of people discount, that damage coming off Vengeful Hammers is pretty nice. And it's a really nice little DPS increase. If we're running the hammers and then hitting some of that, you can see those packets of damage come up really, really quickly. The roads are going to give a ton of stab to people, and this is really important in a game that tends to gate the access to stability for other people behind Guardian. Obviously, there are other classes that can give some stab, but none of them do it as well as Guardian. This is one of the biggest stab generators in the game. So let's put that down. That's a whole lot of stab. It's also weakness on the enemies. It's really hard to beat this for generating stab. When we get into break bars, we'll look at the chains. The chains are absolutely fantastic. And let us finally look at Rite of the Great Dwarf. Rite of the Great Dwarf is a 50% damage decrease. If we stack Rite of the Great Dwarf with protection, we're talking about a temporary but 5-second 80% incoming damage decrease. That is a lot and gives us the ability to tank certain encounters. If we pop those two things, if we have protection, which we're getting coming off our dodge, and Rite of the Great Dwarf, and we hit both of those at once, we are absolutely looking at, for a short amount of time, mitigating 80% of incoming damage. That's the ability to tank. Now, it's not it's not leaving it there for very long, obviously, but it is one of those things. If we know when a lot of spike damage is coming, we can mitigate these things really quickly with that combo. So let's take a look at the Defiance bar, or the break bar section, or the CC section here. The first thing you're going to notice here is I'm actually going to set this for strong. Usually I set this at weak, but this is Revenant, and this is doing a lot of break bar hate, so we want to be able to kind of show that off. Let's go ahead and spawn the Golem there with that strong break bar, and let's take a look at a couple of our options. Our number one option is right here with Forced Engagement, and Forced Engagement under most scenarios is more than you will ever need. Let's dump that down. That's a taunt. As you see, that starts wrecking that strong break bar really, really quickly. Now, another option that we are going to have here in terms of the break bar is we'll get some soft CC off Chilled. We'll get CC from Chilled off Phantom's Onslaught. We'll get it from our dodge. More chill, and that'll bring the break bar down slowly that way. So that is the next way that we'll do it. The last way that we're going to do this here is we are going to go ahead and flip over, and we are going to put ourselves into the red legend is the way we'll refer to it, and we're just going to hit Reaver's Rage, and Reaver's Rage is massive. And those three should be enough to take down just about any break bar. Now we're going to get a little more chilled off the 2 on the sword, okay, and we're going to get some Vulm and some Immob off the 4. Those are going to be nice little, the Immob here is going to be a little bit more soft CC, so that's going to be important as well. So all that comes together to really break those bars really quickly. It really shouldn't be much of a concern, and if you get into a scenario where things are bad, flipping over into Dwarf and hitting Forced Engagement is really going to be your big win. Now, the other thing that Forced Engagement does is this is a taunt in the case of trash mobs. Hitting this will force the enemies to walk to you in auto attacks. Most enemies' auto attacks isn't really worth worrying about. So what I'm going to do is I might just hit Forced Engagement, spin up the hammers, and then just launch Eternity's Requiem. This will clear a lot of trash really quickly in areas that are probably outside the EoD zones. The EoD mobs a little bit more powerful than anything else. So really that is our break bar section of today's tutorial. So there you have it, guys. Vindicator. I love this thing. Vindicator is absolutely hilarious fun. I hope I've given you enough kind of options and ways to tailor it to your own needs. I do want to keep in mind that, you can just go out and mindlessly, spam one, hit a couple of other powers every once in a while and do just fine in most open world scenarios. It is absolutely great. But when it comes to absolutely fighting hard, this thing has so many tricks up its sleeve. I will absolutely recommend you run this, get to know it, get to know both those new legends, learn when to flip over there. Once you build that muscle memory for flipping and have a good idea of what those skills do, you're going to understand why this spec is just so much fun and so powerful. I absolutely love it. So with all that said, hey, I'm going to thank you guys very much for watching this video. And I'm going to say, if you've got any comments, concerns, if you don't like some of the things that were taken out of the previous build videos, please hit up the comments down below and let me know. I am absolutely open to your feedback on these things. I do want to make sure that we are continuing the same way that we've been going up until now. But at the other side, I do want to make these videos a little shorter. The other thing I will say is have fun in game and min-max your real life. And I'm glad we took this moment. We'll see you next time.